bought some beautiful crafts and antiques. And, I went to the Metro, which is the most beautiful Metro I have ever seen. Yeah, I mean, I've only been here one day, but I'm so excited to be in Moscow, and I hope to return.
James?
Well, I'm wearing sunglasses all day today because I experienced Russia in the 2 hours that I had last night, immediately off the plane in a big way. And we had a great time last night. It was lovely. We saw a little bit of the city. We were very lucky to enjoy Red Square to ourselves almost for a good half hour, which was, you see landmarks and you see them all the time, but there's a few that take your breath away, and that actually did make you go, when I saw it. Wow, what a response.
Теперь вопрос продюсеру, мистеру Хатч Паркеру. Вы работаете над фильмами франшизы «Люди Икс» с 2003 года. Саймон, вам вопрос. Вы с 2006. Джеймс, вы с 2011. Джессика, для вас «Темный Феникс» первый фильм в этой серии. Наверное, банальный вопрос, как вам работалось над новым фильмом? Ну, понятно, что степень знакомства с сагой разная, и количество труда, вложенного в эту сагу, разное. И тем не менее, ваши впечатления, возможно, они будут разными, но в этом и вся прелесть. Итак, Хатч, Джеймс, Джессика и Саймон, кто хочет начать? Наверное, Хатч, раз вы с 2003-го первым взялись за эту сагу.
I mean, it's been an amazing experience. The underlying material is so good. I think it sort of dictated the journey. And at least speaking for myself, probably the best part of it is reflected by the other people sitting next to me. That over the years, we've had the chance to work with such incredible talent, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Simon has been with it, kind of almost from the beginning and been our custodian and our leader in terms of the way these stories are told. Has done it with such passion and commitment and creativity and helped us evolve over these many years. And along the way, the family has grown, to include, so many different unique talents. And that's honestly why I think we all do what we do, is the chance to work with incredibly talented people and be inspired and tackle new and challenging stories, all of which has been afforded by this incredible material.
Спасибо. Саймон?
Well, I grew up reading X-Men comics, so I've been living with the X-Men pretty much my entire life. And when I was a kid, I didn't think that I was going to see an X-Men movie. I remember when I did see X-Men 1 that I wasn't involved in. And it was a different kind of comic book film than I'd ever seen before. It was dramatic. It started in Auschwitz, if you remember it. It set a different tone for the genre, and that's something that we've tried to do throughout these movies. And I've worked on, I don't know, 5 or 6 as the writer and the producer, and a couple others with Deadpool and Logan as a producer. And in each time, really the focus has been on the characters. It's been on the emotion that Stan Lee and Chris Claremont and John Byrne, all the great writers of the X-Men comics created, and that we've been sort of translating and adapting over now almost 20 years. And what we really want to do with this movie, I think, is make it the most emotional and the most intimate, the most personal and character-driven of any of these films. So that, for me, was the reason I wanted to direct it, and for me, that's the reason why it's special, and in some ways the culmination of this 20-year journey for the franchise. And for the first class cast, it was James and Michael Fassbender and Jen Lawrence and Nick Holt. Why it feels as though for this cycle it was a natural place to not necessarily end it, but culminate these stranger characters that came together to form a family and are challenged in a different way than they ever have been before, and we just dig deeper into those characters than we've had a chance to in previous films.
Спасибо, Саймон. Ну, не первый раз встреча с этой сагой произошла у Джеймса. И сейчас ваши впечатления об очередной главе. Would you mind take a microphone?
Oh.
Yeah.
So what I feel about the chapter is these movies have always, to me, been about family, and they've been at their best when they're sort of examining a family dynamic in some ways. And I think in First Class we built that family, and then through Days of Future Past and Apocalypse we sort of put that family under a lot of stress, and that family matured and grew. But in this film we're tearing the family apart a little bit. And whether that family stays together or not, or evolves, if you like, to get all mutant about it, into a new form, is definitely unrecognisable from what came in the previous three films. And that's what I loved about this movie when I first read the script, that the guys said that Simon wrote, was it really was hanging on to the family thing, and almost that was the backbone of the whole film. Really, was the family feel. You know, it's not. You know, it's not. Well, it is actually. Yeah. That was a good ending to that question. That answer, wasn't it? Fantastic. Thank you.
Спасибо, Джеймс. Ну и, наконец, Джессика Честейн, скажите, как вы познакомились с материалом, влились в эту компанию, и как вам вообще вся вот эта история, в которой теперь вы находитесь полностью?
I first became acquainted with the material from Simon Kinberg, who we had worked together on The Martian, and he contacted me and said that there was a part of the new X-Men and sent me the script, and what I really responded to was the focus on female relationships in this film, which I hadn't necessarily seen in other comic book movies. I also liked that the heroes and the villains were very complicated, and that our heroes, quote-unquote heroes, do complicated things, maybe for selfish reasons, and our quote-unquote villains do inspiring things and empowering things. And I liked that my character, while trying to manipulate Jean, empowers her at the same time. So that's really why I was excited to join, to work with Simon on his directorial debut. This guy and I work together a lot. I can't get away from him. He's just like...
I'm like your acting coach. Don't know if you've seen her work.
He's my acting coach. He's in all my deals. After every take, he gives me some notes, how I could do it better. It was a great group of people to be working with, and Soph is amazing in the film, so I was happy to be a part of it.
Прекрасно. Возвращаемся к Джеймсу. Многие герои команды Люди Икс в разных сериях предстают то положительными, то отрицательными героями. Но, кажется, впервые профессор Ксавье неоднозначно положительный персонаж, а тот, чьи действия привели к основной драме фильма. Легко ли было передать логичность изменений характера своего героя, Джеймс?
I think Charles in this movie has drank his own Kool-Aid a little bit. I don't know if you guys know that term. He believes in himself in the way that he always has, and he believes in others in the way that he always has. But his mantra that is, there's good in everyone, and everyone has incredible potential. It's almost his slogan. It's become a slogan. He believes in that thing so much that I think he has taken his eye off the ball, and he's become way more interested in the politics of that slogan, and instead of the implication of the meaning behind it. And he's doing that thing of trying to take care of the world instead of taking care of his family, and that, I guess, this movie suggests that is the wrong thing to do. Maybe that isn't. Maybe leaders should take care of the world and sacrifice their family. That might be arguable, but in this movie I think we suggest that that's not necessarily a healthy thing. And he reaps great tragedy really because of that. So how did I get into that? I don't know. It comes from good places. He's trying to do the right thing and he thinks he's a good guy. So you just follow your motivation and your character's motivation, which is heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and for the entire human race. Thank you. That was a quote and the end of my answer.
Спасибо, Джеймс. Ну и, пожалуй, еще один вопрос автору сценария и режиссеру. Саймон, принято считать, что зачастую совместная работа продюсера и режиссера – это компромисс между творчеством и финансовыми устремлениями продюсера. Вы же в фильме «Темный феникс» и режиссер, и продюсер. Насколько это было легко договариваться с самим собой, чтобы фильм нес зрителям задуманные идеи и в то же время был успешным и востребованным у зрителей?
Well, even when I was a producer and not a writer, and then even more so when I was a producer and a writer, and most when I was producer, writer, and director, the creative always came first. I've never been a producer who knows much about the budget or the sort of grown-up aspects of producing. I've always been the person who's worked creatively on the script, who's worked creatively with the actors and the director to realize the vision of the movie rather than to make a budget or a schedule. So the transition from being a producer or a writer-producer to being a director was pretty organic for me. It was pretty natural because the same set of variables applied, which is, you know, how do you tell the best story? How do you dig the deepest into the characters? How do you make the audience feel something emotional, which is the most important thing in any movie? And so there's maybe a tiny little part of the back of my producer brain that knows that there are practical realities to making these movies, even when they have a huge budget like this, but that's not what's dictating me. I mean, really, especially when I'm writing, I'm alone, you know, in a sort of lonely office or a living room somewhere, and I'm just thinking of what the best scenes are and what the best story is to tell, and then I leave it up to Hutch and other grown-ups to reel me in and tell me what's actually possible.
Спасибо, Саймон. Это довольно подробные ответы. Надеюсь, ваше любопытство еще не удовлетворено, и мы можем перейти к вашим вопросам, друзья. Ну, с кого же начать? И, кстати, где у нас микрофон? Я подойду.
Нет, микрофон у нас, все нормально.
Все-таки есть у вас. Ладно? Ну, первый, кто самый смелый? Вы вставайте. Вперед.
Доброе утро, здравствуйте, добро пожаловать в Россию и большое спасибо за фильм. Поскольку частично уже ответили на мой вопрос по поводу того, какая темная сторона была у профессора Ксавье, Джеймс, к вам вопрос. Скажите, насколько оправдано было поведение его в контексте семьи, поскольку мы уже поняли, у меня тоже Люди Икс это скорее фильм о семье, об обществе, которое сейчас существует, где каждый имеет право на свое личное мнение, на свою природу, проявлять ее так, как он хочет. И вопрос, наверное, к Джессике тоже. Вы, когда снимаетесь на съемочной площадке, вы только можете представлять, как будет выглядеть фильм в конце, как это будет выглядеть, как будет конечный продукт выглядеть. Скажите, оправдывает ли ожидания? Все ли так, как вы представляете? Спасибо.
Вопрос был к Джеймсу, да? И вообще ко всем. Отлично.
What a gentleman. You know, it was a new experience for me to do a film where the spectacle was actually a character in the movie. And being on set, most of my scenes are with Soph, and being held up on wires in a room that is like a big green bubble, and talking to Simon and saying, what do you think it's gonna look like? You know, to try to imagine it in my head, and then even when I see it, to kind of go, oh, that means that. It really is such a lesson in letting go and not being in control. And I think as an actor, it's important to do all different kinds of genres and all different kinds of roles because you learn something from each thing. And for me, the one thing I learned on this film was I was a guest in their house. I'm not going to show up and move all their furniture. And I'm just going to ask them.
He does that to me a lot. Whenever he comes out, she brings all my furniture.
I'm just going to ask them, like, what can I do to contribute to what is already an incredible franchise? And the stuff I got from Simon was absolutely so helpful, but I'll tell you, no one can really be prepared for all that work that goes into these films in post. And it wasn't until I saw the film that I was really understanding what I was a part of. But I enjoyed that.
And to answer your question, how do I justify myself? It's a tough one. I don't really try and justify what Charles is doing. I didn't think, as an actor, I'm not trying to do that thing of you have to love your character or you have to think your character's right all the time. I think the movie it doesn't justify his actions really. It might justify, or it might give an explanation as to why he thought he was right to do that at the time, but I think what we're doing is showing that there was no justification for the way that he was behaving.
Роль помимо профессора Совета могли представлять в людях Икс, и кто из персонажей, помимо вашего героя, вам близок в плане характера, духовных и моральных? Спасибо.
And she's telling me, and you said that you love me? Thank you. That's really nice. You can stay. So, who do I feel that I'm most like? Who's closest to me in the franchise? Other than Charles? Maybe Beast. I'd say Beast, he's quite a repressed person in some ways, and quite a contained person in some ways. Jesus, that doesn't sound like me, actually, now that I'm saying it. But when it comes out big. Oh my God. That I can identify with. Jesus. Sounds like a weird person. No.
Отлично. Кто-то уже готов? Вопрос, пожалуйста.
Добрый день, добро пожаловать в яркую солнечную Москву. И вопрос к Джеймсу Макэвою. Мы знаем, что вы большой поклонник шоу Грэма Нортона, вы очень часто принимаете в них участие, со своими коллегами рассказываете уморительные истории о всяческих подставах и играх, в которые вы играете на съемках. Should I speak English? I can do that. Right, so we know that you're a big fan.
I'm on my second translation.
All right, so we know that you're a big fan of Graham Norton's show, where you and your colleagues, when you at this show, you guys always talk about some pranks and some practical jokes you play on each other, or some sort of games. Have there been anything like that?
She's the one. She's the prank master.
All right.
She is.
So maybe it's a question to both.
You pranked me maybe twice. 3 times? Thrice?
All right, so maybe you guys can tell us about what was going on during Dark Phoenix.
I'm not going to tell you. I got a text message from her. I won't tell you what it was, but I got a text message from her that put the fear of God into me for a good, solid couple of hours. So just with the text, she can pretty much unmake a guy. And then she decided that it would be real fun. At one point, I'm on wires in this movie, but I mean, it was wires all over the place. It was on my ankles, on my arms, on my back, and I was sort of being marionetted a little bit, if you will. And she decided to take full control and played the Macarena and made me do the Macarena in front of the entire crew with cameras rolling, and I couldn't stop. It was a really good day for me.
Прекрасно. Идем дальше. Кто-то уже прям готов с микрофоном. Вперед.
Доброе утро, Дмитрий, GQ. У меня вопрос к Хатчу Паркеру. Мы все понимаем, что франшизу ждут большие изменения. Будете ли вы продолжать над ней работать? И, может быть, уже знаете, что ждет фанатов?
Good question. Don't really know. The certain for us is, the future for us is a bit uncertain in terms of what Disney and Kevin Feige will do. I think, we'd certainly be happy to continue in whatever role they would like. But on some level, my expectation is that this will be kind of the culmination of our experience on it, and that they will likely approach the material in their own way and re-explore it. I think that's part of what is sort of extraordinary about the world of these comics is how rich and layered and dimensional they are, and they as a result invite a lot of interpretation and different approaches. So certainly for myself, it's been a blessing. It's been 20 years, and I feel particularly good, to be honest, about where we are now with this film. Simon directing it is the fulfillment of a career, you know, that I think, you know, will go on in all the ways that it will. But it's a really significant landmark to see Simon, who I first met on X-Men 3, as a young writer, grow into the producer and writer that he is, and then becoming the director of one of the biggest movies of the year, and doing so with such poise and skill, and doing something creatively that's ambitious and challenging the form. You know, to be a part of that for so long is incredibly gratifying. So for me, I'm content with whatever comes. You know, as I think for all of us, you're only ever looking for the great stories to try to be a part of, to champion, to have the opportunity to tell them, and that's been the case with this for me and I think for all of us.
Спасибо.
Спасибо.
Следующий вопрос. Кто готов?
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Марсель Македонский, киноход. Сначала, Джессика, я вас люблю. Джеймс, классная прическа. И очки.
Yellow blue glass.
Саймон, во-первых, поздравляю вас с дебютом в режиссуре. А во-вторых, полгода назад на Комик-Коне вы признались, что «Темный Феникс» в последней битве получился не таким, каким вы его задумывали. И мой вопрос такой: в чем была сложность переосмысления персонажа Джин Грей, и, на ваш взгляд, получилась ли она? Спасибо.
In the final battle of the movie? You know, one of the things that was I think the hardest challenge of this film was balancing a movie that was really dramatic and intimate and personal and about the characters with something that also had an immense amount of scale and spectacle and was intergalactic even. And so the finale of this movie was the hardest balance, because it had to have the spectacle and the scale and the size and the excitement that you expect from, you know, a movie of this genre, but also had to stay as emotional and personal as possible, because at the end of the day, this is a movie about Jean. It's a movie about Sophie Turner's character losing control, gaining power, struggling with what it means to have power, and at the end of the movie, hopefully using that power for good. And so that arc of the film could be told as just a straight drama without any supernatural or special effects, visual effects, or it could be told as a superhero movie. And as a superhero movie, there's a responsibility to have all of the explosions and supernatural things happening, but I just didn't want to lose the core of the film. I didn't want to lose that character and the emotionality. And so that balance was something that we worked on probably the hardest in post-production. I had an extraordinary editor, Lee Smith, who won an Oscar for Dunkirk and does all the Chris Nolan movies, and really worked hard with Lee and with some pickups on the film to hone it so that you still feel the characters and the character struggles, even amidst the massive spectacle that's swirling around them.
Спасибо, Саймон. Следующий вопрос.
Максим Марков, «Настоящее кино». Я здесь. У меня, пожалуй, вопрос ко всем нашим гостям. До сих пор в мире существует мнение, что комиксы, как на бумаге, так и в кино, это несерьезный жанр, который не могут конкурировать с какой-нибудь настоящей классикой. Есть, конечно, мнение, и многие из присутствующих в этом зале его разделят, о том, что комиксы это очень круто, но как вы для себя оправдываете вот этот несерьезный жанр? Что он вам дает, что еще могла бы дать, допустим, классическая литература или классический кинематограф? В чем все-таки плюс графических романов, как на бумаге, так и в кино? Вот для всех наших гостей. Спасибо.
Вопрос всем, я понимаю, да?
Okay. I'll start. You know, when Mark Twain and Charles Dickens were writing...
Strong start. You know, when Charles Dickens and Mark Twain, who are read about.
When the writers, novelists of the 19th century were writing, that was pop fiction. That was actually read oftentimes in the newspaper in serialized form, very much like the serialized form of comic books. And they were the most popular format of their time, and comics have become one of the most popular formats of our time. And I know from being around comic book writers and being someone that's read comic books my entire life, there are some comics that are disposable, just as there is some literature that's disposable. And then there's some comics that are written with a seriousness of purpose, drama, character, emotion, thematics, philosophy. They're just as deep as any book you'll read written 100 years ago or 300 years ago. And just because of their popularity and because of the format being different than perhaps what you were used to looking at as classic literature, I think in 100 years' time, in the way that we look at Mark Twain and Charles Dickens and the Bronte sisters and so many great novelists in the 19th century as classics, people will look at The Watchmen and the best of the X-Men comics and Mouse. Those are books that are already taught in schools. I have two boys, 9 and 13 years old, and they just read Mouse in school. So I think we treat it with the seriousness of purpose that the writers treated it with, and that's why you see these movies directed by people like Chris Nolan and some of the greatest filmmakers of our time, and populated with literally the best actors of our time. If you just look at our franchise, forgetting the Avengers franchise that's full of Academy Award nominees and winners, our franchise has Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, go back to Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Ellen Page, Anna Paquin. Every one of those people was nominated for an Oscar, won an Oscar. Serious, serious actors in serious, serious roles. So I think there isn't that prejudice anymore, and it's one of the reasons why this is such a popular format.
I think that when you just look at what the material is about, and you look at, I won't speak for any other comic books, but when you look at what X-Men is about, it's about ghettoization, it's about discrimination, it's about disenfranchised elements of society, it's about people who feel they don't fit in, people who feel like they're not allowed to fit in, and who are terrified of the state. And that's like all very relevant, current, even if it's not current, it's weighty stuff. It's not throwaway at all. How it's written, how it's drawn, you could argue is less, I don't know, has less artistic merit maybe, but I don't think so, I wouldn't argue that. I do think that what comic books allow you to do, just as a format, it allows you to project onto it a little bit. There's nobody, in the way that prose sort of tells you how to feel about what's happening. Comic books don't have that, they've just got the dialogue, really. So you don't have somebody forcing your response to the material with the prose, which I like in comic books. You get to project onto those characters in a very pure way, even in a way that you can't in movies sometimes, because the music's telling you how to feel and all that as well. So it's just a very personal and imaginative thing to read a comic book, I think, because you project onto it in a way that you don't with a movie or with prose. Jessica?
Very seriousness of comic books. I didn't grow up with comic books. I actually grew up, my first, I guess, experience with comics would be the movies, and it would be like X-Men. And I just thought Wolverine was super sexy. So that was my first, like, exploring into comic books. But I would say that, for me, like, I think it's important to do everything. Like, when you look even at the theater, or what you would say is heightened literature, you have Kaufman, and you have Ibsen, and Chekhov would write that it was a comedy, So for me, I don't want to ever take myself too seriously. I want to do things that feel playful and feel like I don't have absolute control over it. And that's why, to me, I feel like I learned a lot from this genre. So I guess that would make it important.
Спасибо, Джессика. Немного дополню вопрос. мистеру Паркеру. Могли ли вы представить, что фильмы жанра кинокомикс превратятся из просто развлечений в кино развлекающие, из фильмов развлекающих в фильмы, затрагивающие серьезные социальные и актуальные проблемы?
Well, I certainly hoped they would. And I think it's a good segue to the answer to that question. To me, I'm not sure how many works of literature or works of art set out to be important, right? I think that's an ambition that might be self-defeating, as opposed to set out to be authentic or truthful or to explore something new about the soul. My first exposure to comics, certainly in this context, invited that they were myth. You know, that they were a continuation of the classic tradition of Greek myth, and the opportunity for an author and the audience to explore complicated ideas in a setting that was more palatable. And to me, what makes material resonant and lasting is the ability of the author, or the storytellers in this case, to connect to the audience in a way that moves them, that changes the way they think, that invites an awareness about issues. And so I approach comics with the same either neutrality or reverence that I would any great piece of literature, and believe that the distinction or the decision as to whether they're important or not is actually not a collective decision that gets made. It's an individual decision that you make. And I think, you know, part of what I find exciting about this material is that it has done so with such great conviction. It's challenged and taken on complicated ideas in our society, as my colleagues have said, that are even more resonant today in some ways than they were perhaps when they were written. So I don't know that I accept the premise that there's a label or a stamp that you can put on, you know, kind of material that says this is important and this isn't. I think it's a little bit less black or white than that in a good way, and that invites all of us to find the stories that resonate. And clearly, you know, beyond the pop culture dimension, I think you're seeing that comic books in the forms we've seen today, and I have no doubt in the forms that will come, will continue to kind of excite and dazzle audiences and invite them to think differently.
Дамы и господа, спасибо вам за ваши супер вопросы к супергероям. Ну и искупайте в аплодисментах всех наших дорогих гостей. Автор и режиссер Кинберг, продюсер Hutch, актриса Джессика Chastain и актер Джеймс McAvoy. Люди Икс, Темный Феникс. Добро пожаловать на премьеру. Смотрите великолепную сагу. Супер эмоции, супер ощущения вам. Люди Икс, Темный Феникс. Спасибо.